B.F. Skinner, Theory of Learning by Cecily Turner. The Early Life of B.F. Skinner. Born on March 20th, 1904, to William, an attorney, and Grace, a homemaker. Skinner's mother was also formerly a pianist and a singer. He was raised in the small town of Susquehanna, Pennsylvania. Skinner had one brother, who was 2 years younger than him, who unfortunately died at the age of 16 due to a cerebral hemorrhage. He enjoyed building and inventing things, which would fuel his experiments later in life. In high school, Skinner started to develop an interest in scientific reasoning from his extensive study of the works of Francis Bacon. He worked in a shoe store while attending high school. Skinner's early professional and personal life. In 1926, he attended Hamilton College and received a B.A. in English literature, where he had plans to become a writer. He failed at being a writer and began working in a bookstore where he was inspired by Pavlon and Watson, who were educational psychologists. He wanted to learn more, so at the age of 24, Skinner enrolled at Harvard University to study psychology. In 1931, he graduated from Harvard with his Ph.D. Skinner's early professional and personal life continued. Skinner worked in a fellowship at Harvard where he researched on operant behavior. He invented the Skinner box, or operant conditioning chamber, to objectively record animal behavior in a compressed time frame. He married Yvonne Blue in 1936, and they had two daughters, Deborah and Julie. He was a teacher at the University of Minnesota, where he started the Pigeon Project during World War I, which was an experiment or project that he taught pigeons to guide war missiles during the war. Educational psychologist. B.F. Skinner is best known for operant conditioning, which is behaviors are conditioned through reinforcement. Any behavior that acts on environment and results in consequences. A child's behavior can be impacted through positive and negative reinforcements, and we respond in a certain way based on learning experiences. He's also known for a schedule of reinforcements, which is anything that strengthens or encourages behavior, positive or negative. The Skinner box, which is used to record animal behavior in a certain time frame during experiments. Career continued as an educational psychologist. Skinner was a psychologist who worked on theories of human behavior. He was the University of Indiana's psychology department chair for 2 years before returning to Harvard. Harvard is where he spent the majority of his career until he retired. He founded the radical behaviorism school of psychology. He wrote Walden 2, which was a fictional story about a utopian society that used operant conditioning to train people to be ideal citizens. He designed the teaching machine, which gave problems in random order for students to do with feedback after each one. And he designed this after his daughters were in school, and he realized that students were becoming bored when the teacher was helping other students, especially if they had already finished their assignment or had mastered whatever task was at hand. Skinner also published the results of his operant conditioning experiments in the Behavior of Organisms in 1938. Influential educational psychologists. There were many educational psychologists that had an impact on Skinner's theories. Three of the main ones are listed here on this slide. The first one is Edward Thorndike. He was a Russian psychologist. Skinner and Thorndike both applied their theories to education. Skinner based his Skinner box similarly to Thorndike's puzzle box, and Skinner applied his theory to many different areas of human society. The second one listed is John Watson. John Watson was the writer of some of the books that Skinner come across when he was working in the bookstore that inspired him to become a psychologist. Watson was an American psychologist, and like Skinner, he was not interested in what people or animals think or feel during experiments. They both had views that contrasted Freud's view of psychology. Skinner expanded his work on operant conditioning, and he concentrated on how behavior was affected by consequences, just like Watson. And the third psychologist listed on here is Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov was also the writer of some of the works that Skinner read while working in the bookstore that inspired him to return to college. Pavlov was a Russian psychologist. He was influenced by Pavlov's experiments, and they were similar in analyzing animal stimuli response, which is classical conditioning. The late life of B.F. Skinner. In the 1960s to 1970s, Skinner wrote many works that applied his theories on behavior to the world, including The Technology of Teaching in 1968, Beyond Freedom and Dignity in 1971, which implies no free will in humans. And in 1974, he wrote Behaviorism to address the rumors about his theories and research. After spending most of his career at Harvard, he retired in 1974, and during the time before his death, he wrote a series of autobiographies. And in 1989, Skinner was diagnosed with leukemia, and 1 year later, on August 18, 1990, Skinner died at his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Influence on teaching today. Current educators need to be familiar with Skinner's work because his views on education teaches both verbal and nonverbal approaches. His theory also encourages student engagement and interest. He also encourages controlling behaviors of students by environment and reinforcing it through particular stimuli. Skinner's theory has strategies that can be applied to students who need reinforcement to achieve a particular behavior. I think that teachers have a multitude of students in their classroom, and many of them learn different ways, and they all come from different backgrounds and different experiences. And so when you take into consideration Skinner's theory, you can learn that in some cases your experiences do shape your behaviors, but he also tells you ways that you can reinforce those behaviors, whether it be through positive or negative. And I think that that is essential to classroom management. Influence on today's teaching. Skinner gave the following examples of steps teachers should take to teach properly. Number 1, ensure the learner clearly understands the actions or performance. I think it's important for teachers to explicitly teach and to clearly state their expectations. Teachers also need to clearly explain their directions, steps to accomplishing an assignment or a specific behavior, so that students have a clear understanding of what is to be taking place. Number 2, separate the task into small steps, starting at simple and working up to complex. This is also essential because you can't build on a knowledge base that isn't there. So the best thing to do is to start with smaller steps, smaller skills, and continue to build on those as the students grow. And number 3, let the learner perform each step, reinforcing correct actions. And this is a great method to use when teaching because you can teach the students the necessities and then you can allow the students to perform each step while you are facilitating and correcting any incorrect actions. And number 4, regulate so that the learner is always successful until finally the goal is reached. This is also one that teachers need to be aware of so that they make sure that they continue to address the goal until it's reached with changes or reinforcements or accommodations so that the learner can be successful in the goal. And number 5, change to random reinforcement to maintain the learner's performance. Many times students get reliant and they expect certain rewards, so it's important for teachers to be aware that they need to change up their reward, change up their time frame to keep the learners interested. I think Skinner, all in all, has great theories that we still, to some degree, use in the classroom today. I think they're essential in classroom management, especially for behavior, because he talks a lot about um, reinforcements and positive and negative punishment and things like that that can help teachers decide the best route for their students.